There we go. All right, welcome to our TMN Tuesday Be the Change Diversity Series event. For our September presentation, we have Making Friends and Influencing People for Conservation. We're glad that you guys are all here with us. We're going to run through a quick tech check, and then I'm going to spend the time or give the time to our panelist speakers today that Michelle is going to introduce. All right, so if you are new to our Be the Change or our TMN Tuesday Diversity Series, we always like to start off our presentations with a quick tech check and a webinar etiquette just to share kind of where we are on the platform and get everybody to that equal grounding. As an attendee, don't worry, you cannot unmute and you cannot share your video, and that is on purpose on these events. We've had up to 1,000, 2,000 participants before, and we definitely want to make sure that our presenters are given the full capacity to share their knowledge, experience, and their discussion points today. If you are seeing me click through some of these slides and you're still not able to hear us, you see our mouths moving, you missed the discussion on eels before the webinar started at noon, and you're having audio issues, I'm going to ask you to take a quick screenshot, which you can't hear me ask you to do, but hopefully you are reading the screen and taking a quick screenshot so that you can adjust your audio settings. All right, and then finally, as always, we have a WebEx helpline. We have a WebEx FAQ page that has lots of resources on it if you're still having issues after that. All right, and then getting into today's webinar, Michelle's going to introduce our speakers here shortly, but in order to interact with our speakers today, we have our chat room open. Chat is going to stay on topic for the discussion points for today only. Please be respectful and professional in all your comments and your questions. Michelle and I are going to be moderating that chat room and monitoring it to be able to ask our speakers the questions during their open Q&A time to help us as moderators and to get your question answered. If you will use full sentences, avoid acronyms, and try the best spelling and grammar possible so that we can get those questions asked how you intend for them to be asked. Again, that chat, if you'll toggle it to everyone, that'll make sure that you're opening that chat discussion for everybody that's joining us today. And then finally, our Be the Change webinar etiquette. As always, you are not able to unmute or share your video as an attendee today's webinar, but that, like we said earlier, is on purpose. Our chat function is open for on-topic discussion only. Please be respectful and professional in all comments or questions. This session is going to stay to that 1 hour mark, hopefully, and we are recording today's event. Today's recording will be posted to the website either late this afternoon, if not first thing tomorrow morning. And then finally, if you're still having issues with our TMN Tuesdays with the WebEx, we do have an FAQ page on our website that you can go to as well. All right, and with that, Michelle, I'm going to let you get us started in introducing Be the Change and then our speakers.
So today's event is, for our Be the Change event, is entitled Making Friends and Influencing People for Conservation. And just as at the same time that our program was initiating this Be the Change series, many of our staff within Texas Parks and Wildlife and many of the people I work with here on the line today were venturing into their own Be the Change effort as staff members within their local communities. And so that's the information from that is what we have to share with you today, or what they will be sharing with you today. As a reminder, our Be the Change series is a mini webinar series where we're exploring all avenues of diversity, equity, and inclusion across the program. As part of our series, we're also including a playbook, which is information, resources, tools, and questions that local chapters can ask themselves, or local conservation groups, and even individual members and other naturalists working in conservation areas can ask themselves in thinking about and planning for and preparing for our Be the Change series and being more inclusive, diverse, and equitable across their decision making, their projects, and with our Master Naturalist events and efforts at their chapter level too. Next slide. While we have you, we want to remind you today's event, we're launching today's TMN Tuesday Be the Change event, but also our upcoming events coming October 12th is our chapter project fair. This is an online version of our exemplary project fair awards that we usually have at our annual meeting. Last year when we went virtual, it was a great success. So we're making the project presentations from the project awards accessible to all of them, and it'll be our October TMN Tuesday event, advanced training event. October 22nd will be our TMN Tuesday Be the Change series event webinar, and this is the last in our series. So be sure to tune in if you like the Be the Change session today. Tune in for more. October 22nd, it's our last session. And it is in conjunction with our Texas Master Naturalist annual meeting. So you would need to register for the annual meeting. While I'm talking about the annual meeting, registration is still open. You have until October 1st to get registered for the meeting, either in person or virtually. It is a hybrid event this year for those of you who are new to our annual meeting and the program. We have the in-person version of the meeting where you can attend near DFW area in person, and then we'll be having the virtual session ongoing at the same time with that annual meeting, October 21st to the 24th. And we'll be dropping links for the registration for the annual meeting and the last of the series in the chat for you too. Without further ado, I want to quickly introduce to you our September speakers for our Be the Change series. I won't go into too much detail about each individual, but other than to let you know, our team of urban biologists at Texas Parks and Wildlife, Kelly Simone, Sam Kieschnick, and Tony Hanahan have been working in this area over almost the past year. And they are joined by Lily Martinez, who is an urban ecologist with the city of Pharr. And they're here to tell you today about how they've made friends and influenced people for conservation in their own local communities. So take it away, team.
Fantastic. It's good to meet y'all. Good to see you again. Seeing a lot of familiar names in the chat, so thanks very much. I'm going to wait just a second. I think I'm going to need to have there we go. I'll go ahead and share the content real quick. And have to say things out loud or else I won't do it right. Let's see. Okay, how does that look, guys? Y'all? Very good. Okay. Welcome, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us, or good noon. Maybe it's not even afternoon yet, is it? I'm Kelly Seymour. I'm the urban wildlife biologist for Central Texas, urban and suburban areas in Central Texas, and stationed out of Austin. And so today, Tony, Sam, Lily, and I are going to be presenting a little bit of work that we've been doing within our own department. So I'll just go ahead and jump right in it. Please feel free to add comments in the chat. I think y'all all know the routine by now, but I look forward to answering those toward the conclusion of the program. So, you know, I'm not telling you anything that you haven't already understood already, since you've already been participating in, I'm sure, a number of these TMN Tuesdays and Be the Change series events, which I think have been, I don't know about y'all, I thought they've been fantastic, and I really have enjoyed broadening my perspective and understanding a little bit more. But we all in this room know, or this virtual room know, that the conservation community, we've long recognized the need to increase our diversity and our perspective for relevancy well into the 21st century and beyond. So we know that we have been increasing our stakeholders by trying to make replicates of ourselves for 20 years at least. We've been trying to make more hunters and anglers folks who contribute to conservation right now um, in a more direct way through hunting license fees, sporting equipment purchases, and policy support. And by now, you probably are aware that those purchases contribute the money that's required for conservation. And that does work sometimes. We certainly have made a whole lot of new or introduced a whole lot of new people to hunting and fishing. But there are a whole lot of people out there who also value nature, who will also vote, but who will always express that appreciation differently. So if we don't involve everyone who values nature, we could do our very best. And we could offer exceptional experiences and opportunities to start hunting and fishing. But the result may be that we recruit, retain, and reactivate only a small portion, maybe 5 to 10% of the population, who will think that our work that our work in conservation is critical to the hunting and fishing way of life that they love. So the biologists that make up our conservation communications teams. Now that's the Urban Wildlife Biologist program. It's also the TNT program, the Texas Nature Tracker program, and of course the Texas Master Naturalist program. This team recognizes, and we have long advocated that to our leadership, that instead of only trying to make more hunters and anglers, we needed to also meet people where they are and provide relevant messaging and opportunities to all Texans. And we'll make more hunters and anglers, of course, but we'll also involve people who value nature, who vote, but who don't necessarily hunt or fish, or do hunt and fish. It's just we just need to broaden our scope. So to give a little context, the Urban Technical Guidance team of Texas Parks and Wildlife is composed of, we're generally thought of as forward-thinking, creative, and enthusiastic wildlife biologists, along with all of our other colleagues throughout the state. But our team in particular has been recognized as leaders of engaging non-traditional audiences, and what you might think of as low-hanging fruit in taking a lead in diversity initiatives. So in understanding how motivated employees might react to anti-racist initiatives like this, I wanted to understand how, I hope future initiatives can anticipate these challenges that we're experiencing and manage for even more success. So our boss challenged us to, as a team, to move from the theoretical to the actual, and to take some anti-racist actions ourselves. Seems pretty easy, right? No problem. Just a walk in the park, right? Okay. Well, our initial challenge was to make connections with diverse people and organizations. So find those folks that we're not reaching and intentionally reach out, have face-to-face conversations, and learn and experience and be in proximity to folks that we have not been in proximity to. And secondly, to intentionally select parks and natural areas in underserved parts of the community and conduct in-depth technical guidance visits as if we had been asked to be there by a landowner or a manager, and then use those observations to further natural appreciation in the area. Okay, so what did we possibly hope to accomplish by doing this? So have you ever been a new kid in school, or maybe had a new job or started a new thing, where you're the new person and you're walking into a new community, new job, new town? I remember my first day of school in second grade. I was the new kid. I was coming from a very rural area, and I moved into a very, very, very urban area. And I went from having a school that had, I don't know, about 100 kids in it, to a school that was bigger than the high school in my hometown, my previous hometown. I didn't know anyone, and I was terrified. In my new elementary school, I was sure all the other kids knew each other already. I was sure they were much more sophisticated and worldly than I was, and they probably even had brand name toys, for crying out loud. So my first day, I did what every successful kid will do when they're going into a new area. I was quiet. I laid low and I just listened. Right? That's what you do when you go into a new group. You just lay low and you listen, and you try to find out things about the people that you're with. So I arrived, I walked in my my homeroom, I sat and watched and listened as the other kids played and chatted and reacquainted after summer vacation. And I listened to what TV shows they watch, what they brought for lunch, what toys they liked. They did have name brand toys, by the way. What they did after school, and most importantly, I was there face to face. I was there face to face listening. Well, as kids often do, by the end of the day, I had made a few new friends and they had introduced me to their friends, and soon I felt like I belonged. So, networking, that term, networking, can kind of feel like an intimidating activity. But it's important to remember that all it really means is developing relationships. And that's what the listening tour was intended to do, create new relationships that so we can identify some of our own blind spots as a team, and also so we can accomplish our mission more effectively. So I wanted to understand the dynamics at play in the listening tour that we had been tasked to do. And so my boss let me interview each of my colleagues. And since I'm a colleague and not a supervisor, I had the freedom to have much more authentic conversations. Not that, you know what I mean. You sometimes feel the need to soften the rough spots when you're talking to a supervisor. I had some very authentic conversations, and we allowed ourselves some kind of brutal introspection and honesty without feeling the need to cushion anything. And we had some great conversations. So I conducted peer-to-peer interviews with most of my colleagues where I asked a series of identical questions. And I hope to find out what they did, how it's working, but also, and maybe more importantly, what they're not able to do and why. So after interviewing my colleagues, I realized that while the global pandemic had impacted all of us, so that we were all of us unable to do as many projects as we had hoped to do, the team conducted activities that could be categorized as either passive or active. So all the team were able to conduct these passive activities, and these were things that included webinars and seminars, books, and conversations with established friends, all touching on very specific to even broad topics of diversity, inclusion, and equity. But a third of us were also able to pursue some active listening tour activities. And these included things like site visits to underserved parks, formation of local advisory committee, and visits with underserved and BIPOC outdoor groups. And now I'm going to pitch it over to Sam so he can take away and talk speak more specifically on activities that they've been doing.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kelly. So I'm up here in Dallas, Fort Worth, and this summer we had the best intern of all time, Karen, and she had the task of selecting some urban parks in South Dallas County. So if you're familiar with Dallas County, uh, pretty much south of I-30 is sort of the large range that I said, pick a couple parks from here, pick a dozen or so. She selected about 16. We went to each one of these parks in South Dallas and sort of ground truth them. We looked to see what sort of opportunities there could be for doing some bio surveys. We also looked at the relatively or saw how safe we would feel, especially with a group of folks at some of these parks too. So we selected 10 parks, and these parks were of all different types of management. Some of them were strictly recreational, so sort of the ball field, the standard ball field that still had some habitat in the margins. Other ones were, well, you could argue sort of unkept parks, but as naturalists, as biologists, we get kind of excited about those unmowed areas. So some of them were selected as that. And there were 10 parks that we selected that ranged from 2 acres to about 150 acres. So a large swath, a spectrum of sizes of these parks. Next slide. And if you know me, you know I can't exist without talking about the most powerful tool that I've ever touched in my life, the most revolutionary thing I've ever seen in my entire life, iNaturalist. So we used the tool of iNaturalist, and we did biosurveys at 10 of these parks. We went out for about 3 hours with a few other folks, some volunteers, and we went out and we surveyed all of the different species that we saw just in that 3-hour window. So we used this tool, and here's Karen taking some pictures of what looks like a spider, and we uploaded all of these to iNaturalist. So let's get into the results now. So in these 10 parks, we observed about 15 folks in total, observed over 3,000 observations, made 3,000 observations of over 900 species. And you can see in the dots on that map, and I hope you can make it out, these are South Dallas. There are 4 different municipalities. So we dealt with Dallas, DeSoto, Duncanville, and Lancaster. And these areas are also relatively underserved by Texas Parks and Wildlife. So that made us especially interested in pursuing some of these parks. And as you can see here, a lot of observations, over 3,000 observations and over 900 species. Next slide. How many can you name? Look at the pictures here. How many of these 11 things can you name? So, we saw a lot of bugs, we saw a lot of birds, we saw a lot of plants, we documented all of these things, we uploaded them to iNaturalist. Another beautiful thing about iNaturalist is that people can watch the observations come in. So it's a very public platform, and you can see a lot of diversity. So of no surprise to us, we noticed a lot of diversity at these different parks. Next slide, Kelly. I like to say, who cares? So who cares? So we saw a bug at a park. Who cares? So what is the relevancy of this data, and how can this data be used? Well, part of our job, I think, as naturalists, is just to notify people of that biodiversity that exists at these parks. So part of what I did is I took this data and we sent some attaboys to the park managers to just say, hey, there is diversity at this park. There's biodiversity at this park, and thank you so much for maintaining this area as an unmanaged spot, or not mowing this little margin of the park there, and highlighted the biodiversity at each of these 10 parks. We also mentioned some of the opportunities for nature enthusiasts, for naturalists, for people that are into nature at each one of these parks. So that was another aspect there. We also brought up some community activities that can be done at these parks for the naturalist community. So the summary of our project was, yes, we noticed biodiversity at these urban parks, and that was something to be celebrated by this area. Next slide.
So I think now we're going to pitch over to Tony and Lily.
Thanks. Okay, everyone. So some of you may know me. I'm Tony Heenahan. I'm the urban biologist here in the Rio Grande Valley with Texas Parks and Wildlife. And I'm joined by Lily Martinez. She's an urban ecologist with the city of FAR. And we're going to talk a little bit about how are we trying to attract new audiences, or how are we trying to reach new audiences, right? One of the big things here is that we're not reaching everyone or as many people as we could. So how do we reach those folks that we don't normally reach? If we do an event outside, we have a certain audience that comes. That's great. We love having those people, but we want to get new folks there. And how do we do that? So my thought was to gather a group of people who work in outreach and education for natural resources, as well as some other perspectives, get them together and chat about, let's evaluate programs we've done that have worked. Who showed up? How many showed up? When were those events? What worked about it, what didn't work, and how do we improve upon those programs to move forward? So can we go to the next slide, Kelly? And then we'll kind of talk about, why did I think we needed this group? So we have a great network here in the Valley of nature centers. Most of them are world birding centers or some variant of a nature center, but they're centered around those centers. And not every public space we have down here is a nature center. Thinking of Hugh Ramsey Park in Harlingen, there's no nature center at that park, but it's a great park. So I thought, well, we need a group that reaches beyond those borders of the nature centers and tries to kind of work at a larger scale. So I reached out. Now, this is a great example for folks in this chat who may want to do something similar in their area, but they don't know who to reach out to. I didn't know who to reach out to. I've been here for 5.5 years and I still don't know nearly enough people, right? There's always more people to meet. So what I did was I reached out to a contact of mine who works for the city of McAllen. His name is John Brush. Many of you may know him. He's very well connected. He knows a lot of great people. And I pitched him this idea. I said, hey, John, what do you think? Do you think this is a good idea? Do you think maybe you can help me reach out to some folks? And he put me in contact with a bunch of really great people. So on the group, we have two urban ecologists, Lily and John, myself as an urban biologist. We have a community health worker from the city of Donna, which is an amazing perspective to have. We have a couple educators from South Texas College, and we have a Texas Master Naturalist on the group as well. So we have a bit of a wide perspective, right? We're always looking for more perspectives, different ideas, different viewpoints to join the group, because the more perspectives we have, the more ideas we're going to generate, and more of a kind of a holistic approach we're going to take to it. So we had that group and we meet monthly. We started meeting in, I think it was July was our first meeting. It may have been June. And I basically just talked to everybody on the group. I said, look, this is my idea. I want to think about generating a strategy that we can bring to our nature centers, to our public events, to our outreaching people, and say, look, if we do this, this, and this, we're going to be able to reach more people. Maybe it's through different kinds of advertising, thinking about our programs differently, maybe when the programs are held. As an aside, I band hummingbirds here in the Valley. And I like to band them in the morning because that's generally when I see a good number of birds at feeders. However, very recently, one of my master naturalists came to me and said, hey, can we do hummingbird banding in the evening, a couple hours before sunset? And I thought, hey, I don't really do that. Sure, let's try it. Well, wouldn't you know, I had like 30 people show up to that event, many kids running around, families. And I asked them, I said, how come, is this the first one y'all have heard about? And many of them said, no, we hear about them all the time, but we can't get up that early on a Saturday. And I said, I understand. I don't want to get up that early on a Saturday either. So a lot of them said just having the event in the afternoon or the evening is much more conducive to having those folks show up. So, just thinking about when we do our programs can be huge and very beneficial. So my goals for the group were initially just generate ideas, right? Get together, let's generate some ideas. And our first couple of meetings were amazing. I came in with very broad ideas, very generalistic hopes and dreams. And the group just started taking that and running with it with their momentum and generating some great ideas. And I loved it. And then just recently, someone in the group said, hey, maybe we should have a mission statement to help kind of guide the group, right? So we can fall back on that if we ever get confused or maybe not really knowing what direction to take. And I thought that's what we should have done first. So we're working on our mission statement. We're working on a name for the group. Currently, we kind of have this standing name as a Rio Grande Valley Outreach Committee, but we're going to generate a new name for the group. And then we're going to move forward from there. So we're working on the mission statement now. And working on ideas. Currently, our ideas that I really, really love are having a community scrapbook. So maybe some kind of social media campaign where we encourage folks to go outdoors, take pictures with their friends and family, post them and share them with us. And we can build this community scrapbook of memories of people enjoying the outdoors here in the Rio Grande Valley. Maybe we do some kind of event where folks who like to keep track of their steps, maybe they have so many steps they need to take a day. Well, they can come do it at a nature center or a public area. And if they do and they reach a certain milestone, they get a collectible pin or badge, right? That'd be really cool. And it would encourage folks to get out a bit more, right? There's some collectability to it. So these are some ideas that we're generating and thinking about, and we'll kind of hash out and get through. But I wanted to give you an idea of something that maybe you can do in your community. If you don't know how to get started, you don't know where to go, maybe you can talk to some folks in your area that do this as a job, who do it maybe more frequently, and you can get them in a group, in a room together, and you can really talk about these ideas and figure out a strategy to move forward. A lot of people kind of get stuck thinking about their one spot, their one piece of property, and it can help to get more folks together to really get the bigger picture. So I'm going to turn it over to Lily now, and she's going to talk a little bit about why did she join this group here in the Valley? What about it appealed to her? And if you were to approach someone like her, how would you do it? What kind of way would be great? Because you may have a really great idea. You may have something that you want to pursue, but if you don't go about, pitching it in the correct way, it may not land correctly. So Lily's going to help you kind of understand what she would be looking for in that opportunity. And then that can help you think about your pitch for, the Lilies in your neighborhood. So go ahead, Lily.
Hello, my name is Lily. So as Tony mentioned, I did join his group. And many of the points that he made are the reason why I joined. I really just wanted to connect with others that are in similar positions as I am. And I wanted to get to know local organizations that are doing, conservation work and that are doing outreach programs, because that's more or less what I'm trying to do as well. And I do want to improve the relationship that, people have with nature. And so much like how he mentioned, using data and statistics on their programs and other programs around the Rio Grande Valley is very critical in determining, how to get people or how to give people the incentive to show up to our programs and to learn more, and to become more conscious of their environment. So if you would like to do this in your own area, a few of the things that Tony mentioned as well can be used to, approach people like me. I would more or less begin by, thinking of some ideas, maybe some reasons as to why you think it's necessary, and bring it up to multiple people that are in similar positions as I am. And then once, you've built those connections and you have those ideas, bring it to everybody and kind of, start growing this group, because right now we're at the very beginning. We're barely starting the foundation to something that's going to be much greater and much more impactful. So yeah, if you're looking to do this and starting a group like ours, I would just begin with ideas and connecting with people. Maybe you already have those connections, connecting with people that are in similar positions as me. And maybe what you can bring to the table. Maybe you want to be a part of the group as well. So yeah, just that's just a few things that I would, I guess, mention to somebody in your area to start this group. Yeah.
Thanks, Lily. All right, Kelly, I think it's back over to you.
Fantastic. Pardon me. So the next activity that some of our biologists had been able to do was to visit with their with local groups with whom they had not yet visited. So these were groups like Outdoor Afro, Latino Outdoors, the Hispanic Business Association that was local to the area, historically Black churches, historically Hispanic churches, or churches, and historically Black colleges and universities. These different activities that were pursued during these times, these were just really social activities, right? So people just maybe attended meetings, like going to the Hispanic Business Association. And the biologist told me that she just attended, she listened to the questions and answers that were being made. She was trying to understand the priorities of the business community in her area. So that was kind of illuminating to her. I tended to join outdoor enthusiast groups. So those were groups like Outdoor Afro and Latino Outdoors. There's a Gay and Lesbian Alliance Outdoors. There's Hiking for Tacos, which are a bunch of 20-somethings who get together. They hike, and then get this, they have tacos. It's great. It is a group that I had never connected with, and a generation that I don't often see. We went for scavenger hunts for weird, oddly formed trees. We hiked historic trails. One of the things that was really cool with these groups was that because they are they're audience focused, is maybe racial or ethnic, then one of the interesting things that they do is they have historic moments or highlights of things that are important to that community. Well, that's pretty cool because that's like half the reason that I'm going is to make relationships and learn what's important in the community. So we learned, for example, about the relationship between Black people and the outdoors, and we all talked about, well, they did a lot more talking, I did a lot more listening about their own relationship with the outdoors and their own relationship with trees in particular. We learned about community health issues. Tony, that kind of ties in nicely with what Tony mentioned, that community health is something that everybody is interested in and we don't often talk about. So we talked about community health issues for that community, and that month was sickle cell anemia. We learned about the historic Mission Trail in San Antonio. I was able to walk that with a combined group of folks. So it was really wonderful. And one of the coolest parts about it was it's doing something that I love to do anyway, which is be outside, riding bikes, doing trails, paddling, eating tacos. All this is good stuff. It's a lot of fun stuff. And I had to really work hard to make it feel like, you know, work. It wasn't. It was relaxing, fun activities. I also went to church a couple of times at historically Black churches, and one and one. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I'm sorry, I can't remember it. But anyway, a historically Hispanic Catholic church, which was a lot of fun also. So my perspective, my understanding, and my friendship circle actually has grown exponentially just by attending these events and making friends. It's been a lot of fun. So speaking of friends, this is a good time to note that while all staff engage in some sort of learning through webinars and books, that's that passive kind of learning, about 9 members of the team engaged in active 4 out of 9 members of the team engaged in active projects. And the staff that were able to increase their professional network were also the ones that engaged in these active relationship building activities. And we know that relationships remove barriers and increase trust and understanding. So it follows that staff who develop these new relationships will also innovate new projects and be more successful in implementing those projects. So I'm talking about, when I talk about friendships, I mean, that's a great side benefit, but just professional relationship building is critically important too. But I say that, and then I'm going to come to this. Almost all of our team members, oh, I don't know why it went ahead. Almost all of our team members said, I am an introvert. Networking is not my thing. In fact, it was the most commonly cited apprehension from all of our staff. So taking time to learn how to build professional relationships is critical if we're going to develop and successfully implement community projects that are more inclusive. So the takeaway message I have here is that networking is a skill that can be developed like any other skill. It's a skill that's critical to our mission. And so probably some training and practice within our team, within our chapters, will be more important than ever if we're going to develop the skill and develop these new relationships. Okay, so speaking of fears and not liking and apprehensions, in those interviews, I found out some information about our team and about some of the challenges and some of the benefits that we realized. So what are the fears that came up or apprehensions that came up with our staff when thinking about starting the listening tour activities? I mean, because really these were activities that were surprisingly hard to start for most of our biologists. Even though we were all on board, we all recognized the need, we all knew that it was an important thing to do. But overwhelmingly, staff was just afraid of making mistakes that would reflect poorly on them or on the department. So they decided concepts including, oh, I have a note here that I'm supposed to pass the mic. I'm sorry. So they had some things including, Tony, you want to bring up some of these fears and apprehensions that we had? Or do you just want me to take it? I can't.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. Actually, I do want to hear more from y'all too, but I'll go over what's on the slide. Things like, I have no idea how to make this initial contact. I really don't feel like I can go up to somebody and say, hey, you're Latino, right? Can I talk with you about nature and conservation? Yeah, I mean, of course, that's going to be a very awkward conversation. That's not what we were hoping to do anyway. People said in all the pictures that the organizations have online, there are only Black people or only Latino people or only 20-something people. And I don't want to be that person that's seen as a spy or an invader and an infiltrator. Also, oh, sorry, the timer. Also, people said this is really uncomfortable. You know, they worried that they felt like they were maybe lying to people because they just were coming in unbidden, right? They're just coming in to come see, to come visit, to network. But they said they felt like maybe they were being felt like a spy. And everybody said that they're an introvert and that networking was just not their thing. So it's worth noting that every single staff member was able to offer a response when I asked about fear and apprehension. But the staff that engaged in active projects, they still had fears. But they also had a technique or a process for moving beyond that fear and take action. And here I really would like to bring in Tony, Sam, and Lily and see if you had anything to add to this apprehension piece of the puzzle.
No, I mean, everyone, when you do this, if you do this something like this, it's fear inducing, right? Unless you're the most extroverted person in the world, talking to new people is scary. It's nerve wracking. You're afraid you might say the wrong thing. You might say something that sounds silly or stupid. Um, the biggest thing here is to understand that if you approach it in an open manner and just be yourself and be honest, don't misrepresent yourself or what you're trying to do, you're going to have success, right? People value honesty. So when I went to everyone in my group, I said, look, guys, this is my idea. What do you think? Because if they came back and they said, nah, we're fine. We already know what to do. We've got it. We're good. That's not the group, right? That's not the people I need to be talking to. But I invited their feedback and they said, yeah, I think this can work. I think we have a reason to do this. So listen to the people you're talking to, be honest about what you want to say, and just, roll with the punches, so to speak. Be open. My group has a lot of ideas, a lot of great ideas, and I just listen. I listen to them and I try to encourage them when I can. I'm not here to say that we have to do this one thing and that's what we're doing, right? If I want to reach new audiences, and if they think the best way to do that is a community scrapbook, then by all means, let's do a community scrapbook. So listen to the people you're trying to meet with and just be honest about why you're there.
I'll mention quickly about one of the fears that that I had going to some of these South Dallas parks. Well, there were a few parks that we went to that were actually kind of scary, and there were a lot of like gang signs all over the place and stuff like that, and there was that a little bit of that fear involved too. And some of these other parks, we were the only white folks there too. So we did have to sacrifice some of our comfort to do that, to do these surveys. So that was one of the fears that we had, that we went into these parks sort of like colonialist, that went into these parks. But the reality was we were just going in as naturalists among probably many other folks that were using the parks for nature too. So that was one of the things that we had to get over.
Lily, did you want to bring anything up?
Yeah, so like Kelly and Tony have mentioned, don't be afraid, go in with an open mind, try it out for one, at least just once, and see how it goes. And like the little quote says on the presentation, don't be afraid, don't let your fear hold you back. So yeah.
Awesome. So the quote that got me started was, I was speaking with a friend of mine who is in diversity, equity, and inclusion himself, and he's a person of color. And he said, "Look, I'm tired of hearing you talk about it. Just get over yourself." And he really said this: Just get over yourself and call. So I was like, well, fine. It's not about me. It wasn't about me, right? It's about going and making a connection. And I built it way up in my head, and that was ridiculous. And Sam, you said sacrificing comfort. I think that's an important point because we do these things because we do these things the way that we have done them because we're good at them and we're comfortable when we're good and we can be leaders when we're doing that. But if we stay doing the things that we're always comfortable doing, I mean, you know this from being a young college student, right? If we keep doing the things that we're comfortable in, we're never going to learn something new. So, and we're never going to progress really. We're just going to keep exercising those same muscles that we do really well. So we've been asking people to come to us, you know, come to our Master Naturalist groups, come to our burning events, come to our, you know, other outreach events. We've been asking people to come to us and they get to experience that uncomfortableness. Well, maybe it's time that we turn around and we open ourselves to being a little uncomfortable and learning more about what to do to make the situation more comfortable for everybody. Okay, so what do we learn? We all learn things too from our experiences. Whether conducting projects or learning more passively or actively, all of our staff learn things. For example, Outdoor Afro and Latino Outdoors also, they're young and vibrant, and they experience the outdoors in a completely, well, it's a recognizable way, so I wouldn't say completely differently, but it was so much fun. It was a lot of fun to engage in those activities with those people. They've got a vibrancy, those organizations. They have a vibrancy that was invigorating and energizing. So that was a lot of fun. We learned about issues that were local to our area, that were issues about race and ethnicity and social justice, that were specific to our areas. For example, redlining. We learned about sundown towns. Some of our biologists learned about that their town had been a sundown town. We learned about local environmental justice issues. I think it was Rachel that said something about Mount Shingle. What was it, Sam? Shingle Mountain. It was an environmental justice thing that really opened her eyes. And I learned about local segregationist city planning that had been enacted in the 20s that you could still see in the city. We will learn that our events sometimes set up conflict between different user groups that we didn't understand. We learned that volunteerism can be seen as exploitative and is inequity. We learned that there is great overlooked habitat throughout the city, even in those areas that we haven't previously been working in. And we also learned that from our connections that on-ramp experiences, that is those experiences that have a low bar to entry that sometimes don't do very often. Those activities can be really good at getting people engaged, starting the activity, and then sets the stage for further participation down the line. All of our biologists were also able to provide some suggested changes, some things that we thought our department or our team should be doing a little bit differently. First of all, and the thing I heard most was we need to be considering offering more multi-generational opportunities that are appropriate for children all the way up to grandmas and grandpas. We learned that we really focus on the same youth activities. And of course, our team is having a hard time doing any kind of youth-centric activities. But those that do, we're focusing on 4-H and Scouts because they're low-hanging fruit. But there are a whole bunch of other groups out there. There's after-school groups. There's YMCA groups. There are all kinds of groups that we're not reaching out to. We got ideas about, this is from your group, Lily, the ideas for special interest groups of fusion activities that might be like art in the park or trick-or-treat trails, things that can be done things that can incorporate different activities and nature as well. And we also, all of us said that representation is critically important as we move forward in hiring, because these are the kind of things that we need. Our people of color, our underserved communities, we need to have their perspective directly and in leadership positions as we move forward.
And one of the quotes that was brought to my attention, and I can't take credit for it, I thought it was beautiful. At a North Central Texas master naturalist, Rose Mercer, she had a lovely analogy that when we as naturalists go into a prairie or into a forest, and if it is a monoculture, so if we just see one species or one type, it's kind of boring and it's not interesting and it's not very resilient. We don't really want to spend time in an area that's just monoculture. So you can sort of extend this analogy to us that with more diversity of cultures, it becomes more interesting. It becomes more resilient, and I would argue it becomes more beautiful. So making this as a priority for us, uh, it was a task given to us by our boss, but also I extend this challenge to all of us that it should be, it's well worthy of becoming a priority in our fields. So there are a lot of opportunities to do these sort of outreach events, but also just simply listening to these other communities of all different types. And the chat has been loaded up with a lot of different communities to reach out to. And it also comes with that touch of a sacrifice, and sometimes the sacrifice is just our comfort, and that is a worthy sacrifice, I think, for this. So recognizing some of that apprehension that we have, just an internal apprehension that we have to extending out to these communities.
So I know some of this may seem like, I can't do this. I'm just a master naturalist, right? These are biologists, these are city employees. This is what their job is. But hopefully we can convince you that you can do this. It's as easy as going to a park and using INAT, right? And when we start thinking about building our community and our audience, we can think about it similar to this plant, right? The deeper your roots go and the more wide they are, the more resilient you're going to be to change or disaster. But if it's just a single person and they're doing all the work, they get a new job and they go somewhere else, well, that whole program falls apart. But if you build a community, a network of people who are interested and energized about what you're doing, then it doesn't matter who changes in that group, because that group is going to continue to move forward and build momentum. And I would encourage you to think about it in terms of perspectives, right? Some people in my group may look the same. Some people in my group may talk the same, may have the same ideas, but they come from different backgrounds. They have different perspectives. They have different interests, different goals and priorities. And bringing those different perspectives together is exactly what we want to do. That's how we get a holistic approach. That's how all of a sudden, when I say, man, we may want to keep track of steps or do that, and then someone says, well, what about people who can't walk? How do we do a program for them? And then we say, oh, of course, well, let's think about getting them involved with the outdoors. And how do we get that community and that audience built into our programs as well? Right. And you just start thinking about new ideas and new perspectives. And I'll end with, I would highly recommend everyone to check out the Nature for American or Nature of Americans report. That is a really great report. You can find it online, Nature of Americans. It talks about how we as adults view nature very differently than kids and a lot of other things. But I'll kind of end with the differences in how adults view nature versus kids. Adults, when asked, what is nature? They would almost always answer, it's something very far away. It's pristine. It's untouched by people. I got to drive hours and hours to get there, and I'm going to be left alone, not seeing anyone else. And then when you ask a kid, what is nature? They point to their backyard at the tree and they say, that's nature. Or they point at the bug on the sidewalk and they say, that's nature. Or they look outside at the sky, at the stars, and they say, that's nature. So how do we think about nature as people? How do our neighbors think about nature? And how do we bring that all together into one cohesive viewpoint? And I think our final slide is our contact info. If you have any questions or comments or you want to reach out to us, please do so. We'd be more than happy to chat further about this topic.
Absolutely. And I want to briefly, I'm going to go to one slide and then I'm going to come back to this one. So I wanted to recognize all of our colleagues who were able to respond to this survey. These are my favorite people in the world besides my family. And thank y'all for speaking. I don't know if some of them are on the call today, but thank you for speaking with me. We had a fantastic conversation. I think it's growing the program. So Michelle and Mary Pearl, if y'all want to lead with questions. I can't see the chat actually, so.
Yes, I'm looking for the questions. Hold on.
Okay, okay. Otherwise, we could just, hey guys, you want to talk about eels? We could talk about eels for a while.
There's some great questions. A lot of them have been answered throughout the event in the chat. Trying to find some.
Yeah.
If you have any questions.
Lots of
So I know
lots
that
of
we
great
provided
shared.
great. I'm sure that we also provide that we have provided some stuff for the playbook. I'm sure we'll provide some more as thoughts come up. But there should already be a few like nuggets of information, particularly how to find. So one thing that most of our biologists said was that we don't know how to find these diverse groups. Well, there's a page for that, as there's a page for everything on the interwebs, and so that's posted in the playbook.
So I did see a question here at the end that said, what's a good first step for a Master Naturalist chapter? I personally would recommend talk with your officers and your advisor for your chapter and propose a project. Think about what you'd like to do. As Lily mentioned, if you were to approach someone, say you want to do something like we're doing here in the Valley with an advisory group. Think about who you'd approach. What's your pitch? What's your 30-second elevator pitch, right? That's always the best way to think about these things. And why is it needed? And how do you think you're going to go about addressing it? So like I did, I said, we need this because we don't have a group that reaches beyond our nature centers for the most part. I have this group of people I want to work with, and we're going to talk about ideas. We have a mission statement now, and we'll work off of that mission statement to build a strategy, right? So very simple, very broad ideas, but simple, right? And so propose a project, I think, to your chapter with a strategy. And it doesn't have to be super intense. It doesn't have to be super detailed. Just think about what you want to do and how you can do it. Maybe it's getting a group together and using INAT to build profiles of parks in your area that you don't normally go to, and building maybe some recommendations that you can then go to those municipalities that manage those parks and say, hey, I was at such and such park. We found this many species. We think it's a great start, but this is how we would improve the park, and this is what we'd like to see. You never know. Maybe those municipalities say, well, we can't afford to do that, but maybe y'all can help us. We'll buy the plants and y'all can help volunteer with the time and put the plants in the ground. That could be a great collaboration, right? So think about it, I think, is a really great way to go about it.
Thank you, Tony. There's a great question in the chat. There's two great questions. One is asking about the Be the Change playbook, and I dropped the link in the chat for that playbook resource, which is a listing on that website, and today's event and resources will be updated later this afternoon, if not tomorrow morning. And then the second question, and I'm going to punt this to the entire panelist, a group of panelists, and y'all let me know who wants to take the lead on answering this first, or how you want to answer this. Talat asks, has there been any institution-wide changes that you are recommended or you have recommended based on this community outreach work in terms of strengthening practice and policy across the board?
I can take the first go. It's because it's the same answer I've given the entire talk. Open up your audience. It doesn't matter who you are, who you work with. I had Actually, just to give you a kind of inside scoop, the TPWD inside scoop, I had a call with a colleague of mine near the Corpus area. They were doing a site evaluation for a potential bird site. And they were asking me, hey, Tony, what do you think we could look at, or what should I be looking for these birds and all this stuff? And I said, here's my ideas. This is what I would look at, blah, blah, et cetera, right? And I said, have you thought about this, and this, that are things that don't have to do anything with birds, but it's all about the visitation, the people aspect of it. And I said, oh, I don't know if we have. So, okay, we'll talk to your Master Naturalist chapter and see what they're thinking about, and see what they may have to have in mind, or how they could help out, or what they can do. And all of a sudden, it's just as simple as, who else should I talk to? I've talked to my network. Who else can I bring into my network, right? Just because they have a different perspective and they can help me think about things in a different way. I think something as simple as that, every time you have a conversation, think about, who else can I invite? Who's one more person I can talk to? And if you don't know anyone, ask your network. Hey guys, do you have anyone else I can talk to that you think would be really helpful? Because all of a sudden, next thing you know, there's 300 people on your list of people that you want to talk to, and you don't have the time to talk to everyone, and that's a great problem to have. So I think that's a really easy way to go about it, at least starting.
Absolutely. So I found out from my perspective, I found out that I didn't know what I didn't know, right? So it was only through talking with people and pitching and being a little bit vulnerable about my, here I'm going to tell you what I'd like to do, but I want to know, how you would change this if you could. So that opens my idea up to being beaten up. So being a little bit vulnerable and pitching your ideas to lots of different people and listening more than you talk. But you're talking about institution-wide changes, and that was that slide we had a little bit earlier about multi-generational projects. I mean, again, look, this presentation is really not, we did this great thing and we found these things and here are these things that we need to do. What we did is we started a project that was really mostly applicable to each of our own groups. And we're hoping to kind of build up, like the playbook that you have at the Master Naturalist, build up some ideas on what we can accomplish using those techniques. So, this is not really about, this is all the things that we have learned and now you need to go do them. This is all about, this is how we're learning what it is that we need to be doing.
Yeah, and I'll also chime in here. And sometimes when I've gone to these kind of presentations where we talk about the things that we do, and it sometimes feels a little bit like we're patting ourselves on the back, like we're completing this project. And I think especially with this, well, actually, if you've ever worked on a restoration project, like out in the field, you can't just wipe your hands and say, oh, we're done. There is that constant management that needs to be done when you're working on a restoration or a preservation project or whatever it might be. And some of the unease of the project not being completed is part of it. And I think that's one of the things that I especially have learned through this, is that it's not one of those things where we go, okay, we're done, time to move on. It's one of those directional paths that we take, and there is that sort of eternal, I don't want to say issue, but eternal opportunity for these sort of events. So that's been one of the things. And going back to the institution wide, that still is a work in progress, much like a restoration project or a management project out in the field, is that it's a work in progress too.
So I am going to wrap this up. Thank you to our panelists. I have a great quote to end on, kind of following that idea, Sam, and I actually have it written on my whiteboard. It was something that we discussed in planning for today's event. When does the forest stop growing or call itself done? And I cannot take credit for that. That quote was shared with us by Tanya Hamayan, the Texas Nature Tracker's biologist. When does the forest call itself done or stop growing? So I think that's a great way to kind of wrap that up. I want to say thank you to all of our attendees for joining our Be the Change September series event. The recording of today's event, like I said, will be posted later this afternoon, if not first thing tomorrow morning. Again, thank you to all of our panelists for joining us today. We really appreciate y'all's experiences, expertise, and your stories. And we hope to see everybody again in October at our next Be the Change event, which is going to be co-hosted with our annual meeting.